they have wingspans up to 10 feet. And, a sparrow may have what, 4 inches, 5-inch wingspan, but yet they're both birds. So, I say that about the Trinity River also. People think, oh, it's not a river, it's not important. Yeah, it's a river. It's just as important as every other river, large and small, on the planet. So I want to mention that. And I also want to mention that another thing we talk about is taking care of the storm drains and any kind of water or anything that goes into a storm drain. So the water needs to be clean. Storm drains are just for water, no pollution in them. And right now we have these beautiful leaves falling all over the Metroplex, right? My yard is gorgeous with beautiful leaves of autumn colors. But when you get ready to do something with those leaves, either leave them on your lawn and in your flower beds in your landscape, compost them, mulch them with mulching mowers and leave them on to fertilize the lawn, or rake them and dispose of them, but do not in any shape or fashion put them down a storm drain. And if you have any of your yard teams, if you see them doing that, please stop them from doing that. Please tell them it is very detrimental to really the community, because it could impact flooding. If storm drains are clogged with yard debris and with lots of leaves, they can't drain properly and convey the water away from our neighborhoods, streets, and our business district streets. So you want to keep them clear and no leaves in them for that reason. But also, if too many leaves hit our different water, our streams, our lakes, our ponds, it can cause bacteria to grow. It can deplete oxygen. It can do a lot of negative things within those living, breathing environments that are sustaining plants and wildlife. So please do everything you can to manage your leaves very properly during this beautiful season of the year. With that, I want to say a few words about Jake, our wonderful speaker today, and the Trinity River Audubon Center, which is always very close to my heart. I love the center and everything it represents. And so Jake has been there. And Jake, how many years have you been with the center now?
I've been the program manager here for about 2.5 years now.
All right, great. Well, it's been wonderful to work with you. And he's bringing a presentation to us, Wintering Sparrows of North Texas. And so I think you'll learn a lot about that. Also, he focuses on the academic programs at the Trinity River Audubon Center. And he just loves, conservation, the environment, of course, birds, and educating. And he's a specialist in that. This is a lifelong calling for him. He's formerly a park ranger for Texas Parks and Wildlife, South Carolina State Parks, and the National Park Service. He also adds his unique perspective to his travels, his advocacy, and how the Dallas area can broaden its positive environmental impact throughout the city. So with that, I'm going to hand this program over to Jake, and everyone, please enjoy it. Thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you, Daisy. Thank you, everybody, for joining and tuning in. I'm excited about this. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So my name is Jake Poinsett. I'm the program manager at the Trinity River Audubon Center. For those of you who have not been there before, I invite you to come out and join us. It's a really special place. We're 10 miles away from downtown Dallas, but it feels a world away. That's what we like to say. We're in the Great Trinity Forest, which is the largest urban bottomland hardwood forest in the nation, right here in Dallas. And we host tons of habitat for lots of wildlife, including some of my favorite birds, sparrows. So today we're going to be talking about the wintering sparrows of North Texas, some of the different migratory species that are utilizing the habitats here in North Texas for the wintertime. This will not be an all-encompassing account of all the sparrows that we have in Texas, because I respect your time and we'll be here for a very long time. But we're going to focus on a few of the species that winter here. And let's begin. There we go. So it's important to go over the Zoom best practices. I'm sure that none of us are strangers to this. We've all participated in many a Zoom program before, but just a reminder to have your camera turned off, make sure your microphone is on mute. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to throw them into the chat box at any time, because we will have time for Q&A at the very end. Make sure your computer sound is up so you can hear me speaking. I'll do my best to speak clearly, I get a little excited about certain topics, and definitely sparrows is one of them. And also, if my voice is a little scratchy, I'll do my best to make sure I'm still speaking clearly, just got over a cold. And make sure your computer's video is on, because there's some wonderful, wonderful photographs for each of these slides. So shout out to one right here, Caroline Sampson. What a great picture of a swamp sparrow and some switchgrass, it looks like. Beautiful silhouette. So I mentioned that I work for the Trinity River Audubon Center, and we're a part of the National Audubon Society. But what does that mean? What is Audubon? What is the story of Audubon? The name Audubon now is like synonymous with birds, but we were actually an organization that was founded way before John James Audubon, or way after John James Audubon passed away. We can thank two pioneers in conservation, Mina B. Hall and Harriet Hemingway. They were sick and tired of high fashion at the time in the late 1800s called plume hats, where people would hunt birds like the great egret for their wispy aigrette feathers to put one feather in a cap. And this became so popular that these birds' populations really started to plummet. So these two women got together, organized gatherings to talk about alternatives. And because of this, little Audubon societies started to pop up all throughout the Northeast. And because of their grassroots efforts, eventually the Audubon Model Law was passed in 1901, which banned all plume hunting. So a really cool grassroots effort for them to speak up and be the voice for birds. And then Audubon just took off from there. It was named after the naturalist and illustrator, John James Audubon, due to his work in conservation, education, and letting people know about the great diversity of birds in North America. And then later on in 1940, the name was changed to the National Audubon Society. And we're still a leader in conservation today. We're a part of advocacy, environmental education, boots on the ground conservation, cutting edge science. And our mission is to protect birds in the places they need for today and tomorrow. And you can see we are now all over the place. Mina B. Hall and Harriet Hemingway were in Massachusetts, where it began. And now we're all over North America, Central America, South America. Here in Texas, we have 3 Audubon centers. And our job is just to provide a bridge for others to build their own relationships with nature. In Dallas, we have the Trinity River Audubon Center. In Cedar Hill, there's the Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center. In San Antonio, we have the Mitchell Lake Audubon Center. And then there are various chapters all throughout the state where you can become involved with different conservation projects, bird walks, ways to get involved with your local community to make your communities more bird friendly. So there's many different ways to get involved with Audubon. Well, this is what we're here for today. Sparrows. They are sometimes the thorn in a birder's side. Many people see a sparrow and just say, it's just some little brown bird, some little brown job, an LBJ. They all look the same. But today we're going to dissect some of the different sparrows you might be finding this time of year, pinpoint their differences, their similarities, their habitat types. But to start off, what is a sparrow? A sparrow is a passerine. Passerines being songbirds or perching birds. Their feet arrangements are perfect for perching. So when you hear the term passerine, it's a songbird and or perching bird. So in North America, we have 2 types of sparrows. Our Old World sparrow, which is in the family Passeridae, and that's the house sparrow, not native to here, but they're some of the most successful birds in the entire world. They're literally everywhere now. So they were brought over to North America many, many, many moons ago, and now they have just taken off. They're found all in urban and suburban areas, but they're actually more closely related to the buntings we have in North America. So here, our New World sparrows are in the family Passerellidae, and there are 38 different species that have been documented in Texas. Most of them are small little brown birds that have variations in little markings and distinctive head markings and colors, but most of them are primarily brown and gray with little flashes of color, little flashes of different versions of themselves. And they all have conical bills because they are primarily insectivores and granivorous birds, depending on the season. So for a good example, the grasshopper sparrow, hence its common name, eats a lot of insects in the summertime and spring, but its diet changes in the fall and winter, and they're primarily granivorous, eating seeds and grains. So depending on the species, but all of them have this conical shaped bill that are used for eating grains and seeds and insects. When and where can you find these sparrows? Like I said before, some of them are year-round residents. We have birds like our field sparrow. You'll find them in every month throughout the year in Texas. And we have our summer breeding sparrows like our grasshopper sparrow. And then we have our wintering species. But nearly half of all sparrow species found in Texas are winter residents. So our population booms because we have all the proper habitat types in North Texas for so many different individuals, so many different species. Many of them are grassland dependent species, so I often make a connection with the Blackland prairie and sparrows. But unfortunately, the Blackland prairie is one of the most endangered ecosystems in the country, with less than 1% remaining intact. And what is remaining is very fragmented and invaded with invasive plant species. Small little pockets that do not support enough habitat requirements for a variety of these sparrow species. So a lot of these birds populations are plummeting, and there's things that we can do as conservationists, as volunteers, as landowners to provide more habitat for sparrows, but we'll get into more of that. But again, today we're going to focus on the ones that are to be found here just in the wintertime. But big shout out to the grasshopper sparrow, one of my favorite birds. They are a breeding bird in the North Texas region. You'll find them in the wintertime in other areas, but around here, you'll find them in the summer. All right, so you found a sparrow. You're looking at it through your binoculars. How are we going to identify it? How are we going to narrow it down? How can we figure out what this LBJ is, this little brown job? With all birding, it's good to focus on GISS, the general impression, shape, and size. But even more specific, let's go over these bullets. Their habitat. Were you in a big, beautiful grassland when you encountered this sparrow? Was it in a more forested setting? Was it in your backyard bird feeder? Understanding the different habitat preferences for certain species can help you narrow it down. And of course, that time of year. If you are birding for the Christmas bird count and a grasshopper sparrow shows up, that's awesome, but that's pretty uncommon. So it's good to narrow down the usual suspects of who you're seeing that time of year where you are. But again, I always like to say, birds don't always read the field guide. So sometimes a bird just shows up when it shouldn't be there, where it shouldn't be. And then their behavior. Some are more solitary species. You'll find on their own, jumping on a blade of grass, going down underneath its habitat. And some are more gregarious, feeding in mixed flocks or large groups of their same species. Another way to identify them is through their songs, how they sound. With birding, a lot of people use mnemonics to identify a certain species, what they sound like. There's different tunes and jingles and rhymes that people use to identify a bird. We all know the barred owl sounds like it's saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And there's some mnemonics for sparrows as well. And then, of course, there's the field marks. This is an up close and personal look of a lark sparrow. And with most sparrows, you'll see all these different field marks on the side of their head, on the back of their head. Some that are good to really focus on are the mallard stripe right here, going from the beak all the way down towards its throat. The submustachial stripe, the mustachial stripe, the lores, the superloral, all these different little colors that can help you tell a savanna sparrow compared to a vesper sparrow. All these tiny little marks, some will be yellow, some will be gray, some will be brown. But what's difficult with sparrows is sometimes you only get to see them for a second with your binoculars and they jump down to the ground. All right, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty and identify some individuals together. The savanna sparrow. This is a medium-sized sparrow that's fairly common this time of year all throughout North Texas, East Texas. It has a small, sharp bill compared to other sparrows. As you can see, it's all buffed and streaky on its back and its belly. Very common with lots of different sparrow species, but a big giveaway for this one is that yellow patch right above the eye. From the beak towards the eye, the yellow patch. That little eyebrow is a good giveaway for them. Again, the grasshopper sparrow has a smaller version, but also has yellow on its shoulders, it looks like. So for the savanna sparrow, it is all brown and white with yellow right above the eyes. And this one can be found in these open, beautiful, pristine, diverse prairies, but also in a field of Johnson grass. So it is just happy in open spaces. It has really high-pitched insect-like call, but also it's easy to spot them perched up in the morning. They're not shy. They're easy to spot. So the savanna sparrow is a really common one you can find this time of year. And, you know, the name savanna sparrow, a lot of these birds' common names are because of its habitat, what it sounds like. So I just assumed that it's called a savanna sparrow because is found in savanna-like habitats, nice open habitat. But it's actually because the ornithologist who first discovered it was in Savannah, Georgia. So that's why. Moving on to one of its doppelgangers, the Vesper sparrow. This is more of a western species, but they share overlap with the Savannah sparrow. Medium size, but still a little bit larger. And you see there's no yellow above the eye. And it's a little more, little darker, doesn't have all the white on its belly, but some good giveaways for this one are the white eye ring, the white outer tail feathers, kind of similar to a mockingbird or a blue-gray gnatcatcher. When you see them fly, they have those white outer tail feathers. Same thing with the Vesper sparrow. And also, they have a chestnut patch on their shoulders. So in comparison to that grasshopper sparrow with the yellow, these have chestnut patches. Another bird that is found in pristine grasslands. It's a good indicator species, a good spot to find them. I've seen a few near Cedar Hill State Park, but much more common in the western states. The Lincoln sparrow. This one is a common visitor in the wintertime. Around the same size as all the other two we mentioned, but more rusty colored. It has more of the red and auburn colors, especially right on top of its head. And it has that yellow mustachial stripe that's going all the way down towards its belly. It has more tan on its belly going into its white. It prefers a nice scrubby habitat. So oftentimes I'll find them around the edge of a grassland and a forest, nice transitional zone where they're feeding on the ground. Like many other sparrows, they have long hind claws that they're using to scrape the leaf litter. If there's something on the ground they're looking for, some seeds that fell, maybe some insects that are trying to hang out underneath the leaf litter. So you'll see them jumping around, making lots of noise in the forest, right on the forest edge. One of my favorites, I mean, they're all my favorite, but this one is super exciting. It's never gets old when you spot one, the swamp sparrow. They have long legs and a long tail compared to other sparrows on the list because they're kind of like miniature wading birds. So this swamp sparrow is found in swampy habitats, hence its common name. And it actually will start to walk around the shallows of a wetland's edge, picking up seeds and insects from the pond. So it uses its long legs to occupy a niche that other sparrows are not occupying. You'll often find them perched up on some switchgrass, like that picture before, or on a cattail, like right here, and they'll jump back down. This one has almost no streaking on its belly compared to the others we saw on the list. And it has overall gray. It has this rusty red cap and very overall dark in its appearance compared to the others, but minimal striking, minimal stripes on it compared to much of the others. So the swamp sparrow, unique habitat, unique way that it forages for food. So really, really cool bird. The song sparrow. This bird is cool because no matter where you live in the lower 48, you're going to see a song sparrow. I'm originally from New Jersey and I had them breeding all over the place, but now I live in Texas and they winter here. So no matter where you live in the lower 48, certain times of year, you have an opportunity to see the song sparrow. They're all over the place. They're variable in colors depending on the location. So Eastern populations are much more brown. Western populations get more orange and rusty, but all of them have this nice little spot on their belly. That's a good way to identify them. And there's actually a really great article put on the Audubon magazine on using your song sparrow as your base to identify sparrows, because once you can narrow that down, it's a good way to use this as a guideline for what other sparrows are in comparison to the song sparrow. So if you can remember all the field marks of what a song sparrow looks like, you can use that in comparison to all the others you may encounter. So it's a good way to identify the other sparrows around you. And hence its name, the song sparrow. It has this beautiful, beautiful melodic tune that it seems like it'll just sing all day long. It is a habitat generalist. I've seen them in beautiful, pristine prairies, hanging out by a bird feeder, in forested settings, city parks, urban parks. So this bird is thriving in multiple habitats, a true generalist. So the fox sparrow looks somewhat similar with its large body, large round body, but has this black and yellow bill. It has a similar pattern of the song sparrow, but less colors on its face. And you can kind of see its patterns on its belly kind of look like they're wispy from a paintbrush, as opposed to the more coarse streaking of a song sparrow. This one winters in forested settings, but is found in more of an open savanna habitat in its breeding range. It also loves to feed on the ground. You know, oftentimes if you're hiking through the woods, it sounds like there's a big animal out there, but it's probably just a bunch of fox sparrows jumping around, moving leaves around looking for food. They can be found on the ground beneath bird feeders. And it's fun to see how these sparrows use different habitat levels. You know, some of them are found higher up in the trees, and some of them are found underneath the trees looking for food. And same thing when it comes to your bird feeder. Some birds are up high on the platform. Others are using all the seeds on the ground that other birds knocked over. And that includes the fox sparrow. But one of the prettiest sparrows on the list here, it's always striking to see. This is a true treat, the Harris's sparrow. The Harris's sparrow is the only endemic breeding songbird to Canada. So every single Harris's sparrow was born in the Arctic tundra, and they only winter in the southern Great Plains. So birders from all over will come to places like North Texas and Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, to see the Harris's sparrow because they have such a specific route to their migration, a specific breeding habitat, a specific wintering habitat. And unfortunately, because of that, their populations are plummeting. They are losing lots and lots of habitat for its breeding grounds and its wintering space and all the historical staging areas along this migration. So they are definitely on the decline in their population numbers. But they're the largest sparrow on the list. Disclaimer that towhees are also related to sparrows, but we're not mentioning them here. But the Harris's sparrow is the largest sparrow on the list with a very long tail. It has this distinctive black cap and throat that the adults get. Juveniles have little patchy black throats that eventually mature or become solid as they mature. Fun story, an ornithologist was watching them in their wintering habitat, feeding in a group. And he noticed that the adults with more black on them had the prime spaces for foraging. So he grabbed the juvenile, he painted him black, and he threw him back into the mixed group. And all the other juveniles just stepped away. Like, okay, sweet. You've earned your rights to eat more than we have. So it's a great example of respecting your elders. You know, the Harris's sparrows in their group all understand that the older sparrows get to eat first. They have this big pink chunky bill, which is a good way to identify them. Chipping sparrows have a pink bill in the wintertime as well. In the their breeding period, they have more of a black bill. But they tend to feed on the ground right on the edge of prairies and forests as well. But a really great bird to see, and it's just special that we still have habitats for them. You can see them a lot here at the Trinity River Audubon Center. So shout out to one of our volunteers, Grady, for this really cool picture. Now, one of the more common wintering sparrows that you'll find here is the white-throated sparrow, and they are quite noisy. So they let their presence be known, and you know, we mentioned mnemonics earlier, but this is a good one to remember. When it's singing, it kind of sounds like it's saying, "Old Sam Peabody, Peabody, Peabody," or some people say, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada." So they breed in the mixed deciduous forests of Canada, and they winter in various forested settings in North Texas. But very obvious that big white throat and the large yellow right above their eyes there. They're often found in mixed groups, mixed flocks of different sparrows feeding on the ground. They will hang out by your backyard bird feeder. You'll see them mixed in with white crowned sparrows, chipping sparrows. So it's a real gregarious bird, and they're super melodic. So it's just a nice thing to hear this time of year. And then we have our white crowned sparrow. It is one of the larger sparrows, but real slender compared to the Harris's sparrow, with a very long tail. His cap is kind of peaked towards the back, and the adults have the black and white stripes on top, when the juveniles have brown and gray stripes on their crown, similar to a chipping sparrow, but much larger than a chipping sparrow. And then also remember the color of the beak. So the chipping sparrows have a pink beak this time of year, when the white crowned sparrows have a yellow beak. Not as common as some of the others on the list here, but the American tree sparrow is always a fun find. Super small sparrow, real thin and long tail. It has that beautiful red on top, and the black and yellow bill is a good giveaway, but little to no streaking like some of the others. Even though it's called a tree sparrow, in its breeding habitat, it actually creates a nest on the ground. So the American tree sparrow is actually a ground nester. The Eurasian tree sparrow, that could be reason why they called it its common name, because it looks somewhat similar. But the American tree sparrow is found in forested habitats, open woodlands in the wintertime. It's another one that you could find near your bird feeder, maybe in North Texas. I've seen them in places like Hagerman, but just not as common in the Dallas area. And then our chipping sparrow. This is one of the most common backyard bird feeder visitors. And you can see that it has that tan pink beak in the wintertime when the breeding birds have the black beak, and it has the stripes on top of its head. It has this clean underside with no spots or barring. We do live in an area where we get them both in the breeding zones or breeding period and wintering period, but where we are, our populations are much, much larger in the wintertime. So that's why we include them on the list here. Now, I feel like I've said this before, but this is my favorite for real this time. This is my favorite. The LeConte sparrow, one of the small sparrows in North America, and it is super secretive. It breeds in tall grass prairies of the Dakotas and Minnesota and Canada, and it winters in tall grass prairies in Texas and Louisiana, Arkansas, but it needs to be in areas of healthy stands of little bluestem. It's one of their most common wintering food sources. So basically healthy prairie in the Blackland Prairie. It's a part of the big four grasses we have down here: little bluestem, big bluestem, switchgrass, and yellow Indian grass. They're much more common in the coastal prairie in the wintertime, but in North Texas, you can still find them where there's still nice, large, contiguous areas of prairie. They're so uncommon and so secretive that they didn't find a nest of the LeConte sparrow until 100 years after it was first observed. So that's how secretive this bird is. And what a beautiful looking bird. It has this nice orange throat and has orange streaks right above the eye, especially when the sun is hitting it bright in the morning. It's a true treat to see. Cedar Hill State Park's a great spot to find them. Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge is a pretty reliable spot. LBJ grasslands, the Lyndon B. Johnson grasslands is another good spot. So uncommon, but if you find these nice healthy stands of little bluestem, there's a chance. And the Henslow sparrow, another uncommon treat, but it'd be a good day of birding if you find both a Henslow's and a LeConte sparrow. That would be fantastic. Somewhat similar in colorations to the LeConte sparrow, but it has much more auburn on its back, and instead of the orange, it's kind of green on its sides of its face there, like an olive green wash. Very, very difficult to find in the wintertime because it rarely ever calls, and you pretty much only spot them if you accidentally flush them. So if you're walking deep into the prairie, you might see one pop up for a second to inspect, see what's going on, and then jump back down into the prairie grasses. Because a lot of these grassland dependent birds, they feel totally safe just weaving in between all the perennial bunch grasses rather than flying from stand to stand. They'll fly if they need to, but they're totally fine with hunkering down and staying low. So a difficult bird to spot, but those places like Lyndon B. Johnson National Grasslands might be a suitable spot to find them. So I gave some clues away already, but where can you find these sparrows? These are just some of the wintering sparrows that are relying on the habitats that we still protect in North Texas, but where can we find them? You can set up a bird feeder. There are a variety of different sparrows that have different feeding requirements. We mentioned before, some are happy being up on a platform or tray feeder. Some prefer to be on the ground underneath, and they're relying on the chickadees and the titmice for knocking all the seeds on the ground, and then they're the cleanup crew on the bottom. And it's important to always think about what we can do to create a more sparrow-friendly habitat where we live, just bird-friendly in general. All living things need food, water, shelter, and space, and that includes our sparrows. And I love having bird feeders out myself, but it's even more important to have native plants because let's say that a bird is not an insectivore, but they'll come and eat the seeds. And if they're not granivorous, they'll eat the insects that are using those plants as larval hosts. So it creates grand diversity by having native plants, and that'll attract lots and lots and lots of wildlife, not just birds. But some of the grasses you can include that are great for sparrows are our big bluestem and little bluestem, inland sea oats. It's a great shade-loving grass, a variety of sunflowers. Goldenrod is a larval host for like 50 different insects, so it's a great thing to include. And then different forbs like black-eyed Susans and coneflowers, they'll produce seeds that are really important for sparrows and other birds as well. I put a couple asterisks at the Texas cupgrass because it's endemic to the southern Great Plains. And if everyone loves the painted bunting, like I do, it's a great thing to include for its breeding habitat. So the Texas cupgrass seeds are a great food source for the painted bunting when they're here in their breeding season. So adding diversity is really, really important for creating a sparrow-friendly yard, because diversity is the most important part of a community, and that includes all of our wildlife communities. Also, it's good to incorporate a brush pile. All those birds we mentioned before, especially the ones that are hanging out around the edge of forests and wetlands, forests and prairies, they love hanging out in brush. They'll go hide out in some wood you have stacked up, especially to hide away from the accipiters, all the different sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks that are watching your bird feeder. That gives them a great place to take shelter. All right, so now you're out birding. You're looking for these sparrows, but where are some of those great places to find them? I mentioned Cedar Hill State Park. They have this beautiful, perfectly maintained prairie on the Talala trailhead. Great diversity there. Layla's another great space to go birding. Lots of great diverse habitats. Hagerman is a true gem, not too far away from Dallas. My great friends at John Bunker Sands Wetland Center, they have tons of swamp sparrows, lots of great sedge wren and marsh wren, great diversity of habitat. The Fort Worth Nature Center has another great prairie, and they have some bison there too. Gus Engeling Wildlife Management Area is near Corsicana. That's one of my favorite haunts to go birding. And there's multiple entrances to the Lyndon B. Johnson National Grasslands, but if you find one that's really, really suitable for prairie birds, it's a great place to continue to go to. Then, of course, track. We have guided bird walks every third Saturday of the month, where we have usually 20 to 30 species we find each time in just an hour, and you're more than welcome to stick around afterwards and check out the rest of the trails that we didn't encounter together as a group. So birding is a lot of fun, and it's great to go and enjoy some fresh air, go check out different habitats that we have in North Texas, enjoy the birds of your bird feeder, but you can also contribute to science while you're doing it. eBird is a really great tool to use to find where you want to go birding, but also all the species that you upload onto eBird, that data is really, really important for ornithologists to understand bird populations, habitat health. So you're really contributing to science when you use eBird. Project Feeder Watch, very similar. You can upload the different things you have in your bird feeder. I invite you all to look up your local circles for the Christmas bird count. That's another great way to contribute to science. The Great Backyard Bird Count in February. If you have large contiguous habitat, Project Prairie Birds with Texas Parks and Wildlife, they help you make habitat management plans to make your habitat more bird friendly. And then there's tools like Merlin, where you can get better at IDing birds. It's a great app to use on your phone. It's super user friendly. They also have an audio component now too, where you just hold up your phone and it listens to the birds calling. It can help you identify what birds are in your area. Audubon has a great field guide app as well for you to identify the different species you're looking at, and also keep a life list of all the different birds you've seen, when and where. But please volunteer at your local Audubon Center so you can contribute to community science. You can help with our restoration. You can come birding with us. All these different things for sparrows. And thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. And if there's any questions, I think we got some time. I'll look through the chat here. Chuck, I'm excited too that the white-throated sparrows are back. Oh, LBJ stands for Little Brown Job. That's what a lot of people like to say. Yeah, Reba, thank you. Exactly, Judy. Having native plants is beneficial for our wallets too. Saving in the costs of fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, and then also with water. It's less use. It's used to our climate, our growing zone, the amount of precipitation we get. Native plants are, I'm a huge proponent for them. They're great for many different reasons. I think that this was recorded, Tom. So at the Audubon Center, we've had about 250 species documented of birds altogether. Know more about native plants to bring to the birds. So a great resource is wildflower.org, and they have different plant collections. And if you look up the Blackland Prairie Special Collection, it has a pretty comprehensive list of all the different grasses and forbs and woody species that are found within our different plant communities of the Blackland Prairie. And it has a great resource of what their blooming season is, how to propagate, what type of wildlife it attracts. So I use that resource all the time. Wildflower.org. It's run by the Wildflower Center in Austin. Yeah. And then also I got to plug Audubon Plants for Birds. If you go on our Audubon website, put in your zip code, it'll tell you all the great plants that are great for attracting birds and easy to grow, little to no management needed. Once you install these native plants, they're on their own. They thrive. Best places to purchase native plants in Dallas. I think everybody has their own favorites. Big shout out to my friend Randy Johnson. He has a lot of great native plants that are specifically from genetics of North Texas. And if you look him up, Organic Randy, he has a Facebook page. You can reach out to him. There's different plant sales like Dogwood Canyon, our sister center in Cedar Hill. They have a native plant sale a couple times a year. And I believe the Discovery Gardens does as well.
Yeah, I was about to say the Texas Discovery Garden, correct.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have one coming up probably in February or March. They have a spring, I think. Yeah, so those are great.
Awesome. All right, what else? So current state of the prairies around the state. And so the Blackland Prairie, specifically, less than 1% remains intact. So it's very endangered. Overall, tallgrass prairies in North America, I think 4% is left, and that's it. So where we are in the southern Great Plains, we're in the tallgrass prairie section, the eastern portion of it. And that's the most endangered of all the Great Plains ecoregions. And yes, the lark sparrows are here all year round. We do get a boom in the wintertime, but that is a breeding bird in North Texas. So a lot of the prairies that do remain are on private property, since most of the land in Texas is privately owned, but there are some wonderful private landowners that really care about keeping the native plant communities as pristine and as a climax plant community as possible.
Well, the grounds of track are established to replicate the native Blackland Prairie. Is that correct, Jake?
That is right. We're having ongoing prairie restoration. It's never one and done. So where we are used to be the largest illegal dump site in Texas history. So we have lots of restoration that's forever happening. And if you want to, folks want to volunteer and be a part of it, we'd love to have more folks help out by propagating plants. We collect seeds on site. We propagate by root division. We grow them in our greenhouse, then we plant them out in the different areas that are deemed are most in need of restoration. And then we remove the invasive species, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Those seeds are music to the seed library's ears. So the Dallas Public Library has a seed library, so anything extra can come to them.
Oh yeah, we'd love to partner with you guys. That'd be good. How much damage did the freeze in February cause to overwintering birds? I saw there's different reports of birds like the buff-bellied hummingbird that got hit pretty hard. But most populations boom and bust. And sometimes, like within eruption, there's a lot of suitable habitat during their breeding zone, then we have a bunch in the wintertime. And then in their breeding zone, there's not that much, and we have very limited in the wintertime. So these things come and go. They go up and down.
One of the things I saw that happened, and this could just be, maybe it didn't occur because of this, but I feel like because of that storm, we had always had a few robins in our neighborhood, but during the time of the storm and then immediately after, there would be yards covered in robins in our neighborhood. And I think what happened is they were migrating through and they got caught by the storm and they ended up here. And many of them stayed. We now have more robins in the neighborhood than we did that year, and we did this year as well, than we ever had before. So it changed their range. If you would, maybe that's too dramatic a statement, but it feels like it changed their range. They were heading to go further up north and they didn't make it. So they stayed down here and now they've returned. So we have, like, I've always wanted a robin in my yard, and I have 2 of them in my yard this year because, and of course we had a lot in 2021, but I feel like that it might have changed some of their migratory patterns, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
I know that year in 2021, there was an eruption of a bunch of different birds like robins and I think pine siskin. And then just, the way it happened was also the awful year of our freeze. And, a lot of them showed up where people had bird feeders and there were still some berries left in some trees. And, but I did notice that there's a lot of breeding populations of American robin in Dallas.
Dallas now.
Yeah.
I don't know if they always were, but I know that, like I said, in this neighborhood where I am, we have a lot more now than we did. And of course, it's lovely to have them. And I agree. And I'm so kind of heartbroken because the pine siskins they didn't return to my feeder this year, but they were there in 2021. It was so beautiful to see them. And I saw a painted bunting at my feeder during that, right after that storm. I mean, it was just breathtaking, all the birds that were coming to my feeders at that time. And I have quite a few, so it was so delightful. But they haven't all returned, so yeah, they went back to their normal patterns.
It was a weird fall migration. I don't know if anyone else noticed that too, or everyone feels that way too. There was a lot of birds. It took a while to come down, especially the songbirds. And I don't see cedar waxwings as much as I used to in certain areas. But hopefully they'll start to show up in larger numbers again.
That's true. We used to have a big flock that hung around here, and I could set my clock on about 4 o'clock. About 35 or so of them would come to a big tree that I could see real near my house, a real high, large tree. And they would all get up in the top branches and just take that last rays of the sun before the sun sets. And they're not here anymore. I hadn't thought of that, but they're not here this year or last year. They weren't here last year either.
Alicia, you mentioned that other groups have noticed that as well. Yeah, we just haven't been seeing them as much. I'm not originally from the area, so I don't know,
what caused it.
Or what the numbers were before.
Climate change.
If you look at the most recent annual report, like on the state of birds that was put out by Cornell and Audubon and various other organizations, there's a lot of birds that are being affected by various things like climate change, habitat loss, habitat degradation. And the Harrison sparrow, the one we're talking about, is very, very much so at risk.
Well, one of the things I feel has happened around here is there were some, for years and years, there were some, small stands of wooded areas, and they've all been taken down now. Multifamily housing's going up. And so that's what I felt like impacted the cedar waxwings and some of those kind of birds that like to flock and congregate and go out hunting together. Hang out. So they don't come here anymore.
The DFW area is forever growing. But a way to, if anyone's interested to get involved is the Lights Out program. That's another great way to contribute to science during spring and fall migration. We have volunteers that hit downtown Dallas bright and early to see if there's any window collisions and collect the data. Texas A&M uses it for a variety of ways to see where these birds were wintering, if there was any parasites that are specific to somewhere in South America, where they were breeding, where they're coming from. if any birds were tagged, and then there's also the different trends, what individual species are most impacted by these window collisions.
It's a great program.
Yeah, so if
Mhm.
everybody wants to be a part of that, Dallas is a bird city. With conservation, I feel like we always talk about the doom and gloom, but there are some great things that are being done. And Dallas being a bird city is pretty exciting stuff. So if anyone wants to participate in the program, it's going to jump back up in the spring.
And Dallas has been Tree City USA for about, I think, 15 years now. And now we're Bird City also. So it is very exciting.
Yeah.
Lots of concrete and grass, but lots of wild spaces that it takes everybody to care about. And, just right outside your door, everything right around you can help any of these species.
Totally.
Just in your own landscape, at your own home, on your patio, anywhere. Yeah.
Eastern bluebirds, phoebes, cardinals. Yeah, it's good
lovely
diversity. Yeah. So the Eastern bluebird is a good example of birds that are really thriving. That the push to put up bluebird boxes, and their range is kind of expanding a little bit, the Eastern bluebird. And they're really taking advantage of these farms that are being created. So they breed in open spaces, open savanna habitats. And again, not all is doom and gloom. That's a bird that is doing all right, but they are at risk with certain pesticides like neonicotinoids, things that harm their food sources, so that in turn they can get secondary poisoning.
Yeah. And Jake, you may have mentioned it, but the Trinity River, this corridor that we're on right here, the Dallas, the Dallas corridor, and then the Trinity River corridor all the way down south. It's on one of the major flyways for the migratory birds. And there's over 400 species, right, that come through. Obviously, some of it may have changed, but basically there's over 400 species of birds that come through and have been documented that use this flyway. From the northern to the southern and the various places where they go in summer and winter.
That's right. Yeah, we're on the Central Flyway. Texas is a really important spot for migratory birds. 1 out of every 3 migratory birds will pass through Texas in the spring, 1 out of every 4 in the fall. So depending on the
and that's over 50% of the bird species in America that come through here. So
it's remarkable.
It is remarkable.
And a lot of them will stop at the same spot. We call them historical staging areas. So it's important to keep these places preserved for long periods of time. So it could be the same exact birds that are stopping in the same place along their path. And let's say that the Audubon Center turns into a parking lot tomorrow, and then next year, a lot of those birds will be returning, and that will no longer be the case of them finding spaces, specifically for shorebirds. It's really important for shorebirds that they'll stop along the same spot. Yeah, so there could be a million different reasons why bird populations go up and down, boom and bust. Individuals in one area, they might find food source in another spot that's more suitable for them. Maybe there is some development nearby where they were living when they were leaving to forage and look for food. So there could be a million different things that can contribute to it. But I would say just leave up the feeders, and if you wanted to bring them out, but most important, you got the water sources for them. But if you do leave your feeders, it's important to keep them clean and change out the food.
Absolutely.
Well, this was fun, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation. And I invite you all to come out birding at the Audubon Center. I recognize some friends on the list. Thank you for all joining in. And if you're interested in volunteering with us, please shoot me an email. I'll leave my email in the chat right here.